a place he comes to me. Though I'm blind, he helps me see. Though I see dimly in this place, one day I'll see him face to face.
This is Kurt Kaikkonen, pastor of Calvary Chapel, Waterford, at your neighborhood church. Today on Face to Face, we'll be in the book of Genesis. So grab your Bibles and let's get started. If you want to hear this complete message in its entirety, go to yourneighborhoodchurch.com, where you can download Your Neighborhood Church app at the App Store. And then we get to chapter 7, and it says that the Lord said to Noah, "Come into the ark, you and all your household." So God asks Noah to come into the ark. And that's a lot different than God telling Noah to go into the ark. Because by him saying to come into the ark, it's like God saying, come in here with me. Come in here where I am. And then after they went in with his family, that door was left open for 7 days. And the reason is because that door was left open for anybody to come in. But the truth is, God had left a door open way longer than 7 days. He had been warning them for over 120 years, just when he had this countdown. But even before that, he left that door open from Methuselah, who'd been there almost 1,000 years. And that poor old Methuselah, he kept getting older and older, and everybody's watching because they know what his name means. And then he finally died. But nobody came. Nobody ever came because nobody believed. But I believe everybody knew. And right now, in our times, well, the doors are open to escape even a greater judgment than the flood that's going to be coming on this world. And there doesn't seem to be a big rush to come in. But just like God shut the door for Noah and his family after those 7 days, the Lord's going to shut the door in our generations where nobody else is going to be able to come in. And we read here in the ark that it wasn't Noah who shut the door. The Lord shut the door. When it happens in our generation, it'll also be the Lord who shuts that door. And so the Lord, he waited a long time for anybody to come that would want to come. Nobody just wanted to come. So now Noah, he's 600 years old, and he's in that ark with his wife and his sons and with their wives. So there's only 8 people out of the whole world, and we never learn the name of any of those wives. They've been in that ark for a week, and now water starts coming down, not only from the sky, from those windows of heaven in the form of rain, but we're told that the foundations of the great deep were broken up. That means a lot of water came up from under the ground. And today, many people who look at a lot of the great big caves, they say that when they look at it and they see those little pillars, that the erosion isn't coming down like people had thought, that it was from a lot of water, and there was a lot of water coming up, and that it actually happened very quickly. And the world's topography, the way that the world looks today, is a lot different than it appeared before the flood. Because that flood is what made the mountains and all the valleys. And we're told that it rained for 40 days, but we're told that the water rose for 150 days. So even after it stopped raining, there was still 110 days where that water kept rising and rising. And it said everything died, everything that had breath. So the fish, they lived, but everything else died. All the birds, all the cattle, all the people, they died. And, and we see this evidence in our fossil record, but there's also these caves that have been found, these hidden caves, and they have all these different types of animal bones in them. And there's one famous cave, and it's in England, and it's called the Kirkdale Cave. And they found it in the mid-1800s, and it had never been touched. And it had a very, very small opening on the top where they had to actually crawl down inside of it. And it had animal bones, and it had animal bones like hippopotamuses, and it had elephants and lions and all kinds of animals that didn't live in England. They didn't belong in England.
And all their bones were together in this cave as if they'd been deposited, but they weren't buried. They were very close to the surface. And so you have to imagine this flood of the world, and you'd see all these animals starting to pool around, swirling, waiting to be deposited somewhere because they had to go somewhere. And we also know this flood is true because of every culture in the world, literally hundreds of people groups, they all have legends of this flood. And the closest to the Genesis account is the Babylonian account. But these stories also came from places like New Guinea. There was 2 American Indian tribes who had stories of the flood. From Greenland, from Brazil, from Peru. The native Hawaiians, they have a story. The Persians, the Greeks, the Australian natives, the Siberians. And that's just some of them, because it was over 100 people groups. And out of all these stories, more than half of them confirm that it was just only one family saved, and that it was a catastrophic flood, and that flood was caused due to wickedness, and that the animals were also saved, and that the survivors ended up on a mountain. And that's exactly where they all ended up. They ended up in Mount Ararat, which is in Turkey. And then our Bible says that God remembered Noah. And that doesn't mean that he ever forgot Noah. All it means is that God starts to act in Noah's behalf. And it says that God caused the wind to blow, and the waters, they started to recede. And just like it took 150 days to rise, it took 150 days to recede. And so it says that after the 10th month, after the waters were receding, that Noah opened a window and he sent out a raven, which is one of the unclean birds. And that raven, he never came back, because that raven, he was having a feast, because ravens eat dead things. And so he didn't mind landing on these dead things and eating them. But the next week, Noah sent out a dove, and the dove is a clean bird. He doesn't eat dead things. And it said there was no place for him to land because it was still full of water. And so he came back, and Noah put his hand out, and he landed in his hand, and he brought him back in. And then he sent him out another week, and he comes back not with an olive branch. That's what you always see, the dove with the olive. It was just an olive leaf. He plucked a fresh leaf. And then he did the same thing in the next week, and then the dove didn't return. And so that's when Noah knew that the water had receded. And he took off the cover of the ark because he knew the land was dry, but he still didn't leave the ark. He didn't leave the ark till God told him to leave. And that total amount of time that Noah and his family spent in the ark, it was a year and 10 days. And I believe there's a reason that God had left that ark up in Mount Ararat, high up in that mountain. And that's because it couldn't be dismissed, that it froze up there, and it could never be overlooked. Because if you ever read about the ark and people who have seen the ark through all of time, that it's like almost like the biggest national secret of the world. But Turkey, being a Muslim nation, they won't allow people in there to go see the ark. But it's been there since God placed it there. And you can read that way back in 275 before Christ, BC, that there was a Babylonian historian who talks about people going up there and scraping the pitch off of it. They scraped the pitch off of a ship that was lodged in the Armenian mountains. And then in 75 AD, Josephus, the famous Jewish historian, and he was around Jesus' time, he wrote that the locals from that area, that they would bring relics, that they would collect relics from the ark, and they would bring them down, they'd show them around. And he also wrote that all the ancient historians, that they also all wrote about the ark, and that means that they were ancient to him. And then in 80 AD, it's written that the ark could still be seen up in the mountains. And then recently, in 1856, there's a story of these 3 atheists, and they were all scientists, and they had climbed Mount Ararat to disprove the existence of that ark. But then they found the ark, and they were dismayed, and they tried to destroy it. But the ark was too big, and the wood had petrified. And that story came from one of the sons. But that story was also confirmed by one of the scientists in 1918 in England, where on his deathbed, he confirmed that story was true. There's a date of 1916 when the ark was seen by 6 Turkish soldiers. And then a little later, there was a Russian aviator who flew over Mount Ararat. And he saw the ark, and he described it as being the size of a battleship, but that the door was missing, and that door would be approximately 20 square feet in size. And then it was also photographed. It was photographed in World War II by 2 American pilots that were flying over Mount Ararat. And so there's evidence that this ark is real, and the ark is still there. And I believe God left it there on purpose so that we'd have to deal with it. And somehow this world, it still doesn't care much, and it tries to ignore it. And so the first thing that God told Noah when he left the ark is he told him to be fruitful and to multiply, which is the same command that God gave to Adam, because now this world is starting over. And now Noah is going to be like the new Adam. And the first thing that Noah did when he got off the ark is he built an altar and he worshiped. And he took one of each of the clean animals and he made an offering to the Lord. And that kind of makes sense why there were 7, because there would still be 3 breeding pairs left to fill the earth. And it says that God received Noah's worship. And then we're told about something that God said in his heart. And we learn that God doesn't like to curse the ground because of how wicked we are, that he's not going to do this again. He's not going to destroy the earth by flood, because he knows that our thoughts are evil from the time we're born. And he says he's never going to destroy us again like that. And that's because God really loves man, and God is really trying to save us. So now all the rules are changed in the world. It's going to be different laws. From now on, it says that as long as the earth remains, it'll be seed time and harvest, cold and heat, winter and summer, and day and night. That process won't end as long as the earth remains. And you have to remember, even besides rain, it still hadn't even snowed. And I don't think they stayed around that ark long, because I think it was too cold because it's frozen up there. And I think that's why the Lord, he placed it up there. But there was other changes that God had made. He wasn't going to let men live as long so that we wouldn't get as corrupt, because living 900 years, you could get pretty corrupt. And then he gives us a rainbow to remind us that he's not going to do this again. Okay, there was something that kept coming to my mind. And what it was is, what did they do for a year on that boat? Did they play cards? Was it Scrabble? In my mind, I kind of think probably checkers kind of fits, because that's an old game. And I'm thinking that they played checkers. There weren't any kids on the boat. It was just 8 adults. And if you really think about it, those wives, those boys' wives, Noah's 3 sons, they lost their whole family. But then again, everybody lost everything they knew. All they had was themselves. And so it had to have been kind of bittersweet. It was saying goodbye to everything you knew, everything in the past, but also being grateful for being saved. And though probably a little apprehensive, they're probably also still a little bit excited about this new world that they're going to start. And that's exactly how it is when you come to Christ. You say goodbye to this old world that you'd lived in, but you're still a little bit excited about what God's going to do, because God has given you some promises. And it's been a whole year that they're cooped up. And I know if it was my family, we would have all had to have our own places on the ark to get away from each other, at least for some of the time. Because these guys, they were just people.
You've been listening to Face to Face. Face to Face on this radio station has been provided by Your Neighborhood Church. If you want to help support Face to Face and put this program on other stations just like yours, you can contact us at yourneighborhoodchurch.com or write Your Neighborhood Church, P.O. Box 500, Romeo, Michigan 48065.
There's a place he comes to me. Though I'm blind, he helps me see. Though I see dimly in this place, one day I'll see him face to face.
Tune in again tomorrow at this same time as we continue to go through the Bible.